Hello, my fireflies, and welcome back to the Science Firefly. It's me, Lyiat,
And Azilie.
and we're here with yet another Sunday sit-down. How you guys doing? How are you doing, Azilie?
I'm doing pretty good.
That's good.
Surviving another day. Made it through the holiday.
So, we've been a little infrequent with sit-downs lately, but we're still making them.
Well, that's what happens when we're kind of brain dead for topics.
Well, that, and it's been a very odd set of weeks. Not to mention it was a holiday week last week, so there wasn't a whole lot of content on the channel anyway. I apologize for that. I'm going to keep apologizing for it because it's going to keep on happening until we eventually become a professional company. So, there you are. So, what have we been playing this week? What is the update for the channel?
Oh, we've been doing a little bit of Guild Wars.
Yes, Azilie has certainly gotten back into that game.
Yeah. I get out of work, I sit down on my computer, and I pull up Guild Wars.
Yes.
Like a loser.
Like a loser?
Yes.
I'd say that maybe if you were playing WoW. We just lost half of our subscribers right there. No. But in all seriousness, there have been some very interesting things we've gotten to get a hold of. We have some code for some fun games. I released a video on Under the Ocean earlier this week, which was pretty cool.
That one looks very interesting. I remember seeing you playing it. Wasn't it one of the PR guys gave you really early access to it?
Yes, it's currently in an active alpha. It is it's basically kind of like a Terraria-esque survival game with a more emphasis on survival. You actually have to hunt things down and eat and take care of certain needs and stuff like that. But Paul Greasley, that's the guy. I've been talking to him over Skype every once in a while, and he's the one who gave me access to that game. And I've helped him out with a little bug testing, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah, the bug testing you ended up helping him with was actually kind of funny.
Yeah. He probably doesn't think so.
Well, it seems like he got that fixed.
Yes, he did, from what I understand. Yeah. There was a bugged thing with the anchor point that you start out the game with, which kind of screws up how objects mesh with one another, and it makes them interactive when they really shouldn't be interactive.
Yeah, like I remember you trying to build, it was either the base of a house or a bridge, and then suddenly, like, the bridge kept wobbling and bending on you.
The way I build houses in that game, they're kind of like a house on top of a pier.
Right, yeah.
So I was building the pier part, and basically I could still move the logs, and it did some really weird stuff. I don't know if I still have any footage of that, but... So, what else? Fallen Enchantress, which I haven't done a video yet of, but I will eventually do it. And Cortex Command. I keep on putting off that video for some reason. But I will put it out, I promise. Other than that, I can't think of too many other... Well... The elephant in the room, which is Assassin's Creed 3. Now, Assassin's Creed 3 has come out for PC as of the 20th, which was on Tuesday. Now, I've planned on doing a full Let's Play of that game for you guys. However, I uploaded the first video for that last night, and YouTube immediately flagged it, saying that it was Ubisoft copyright. So I'm currently trying to contact one of the people in the Ubisoft PR department to get that sorted out. Unfortunately, I can't really release the video until then, because if I do, I could get a black mark against the channel, which we really don't want.
Right.
So there is that. Now, the footage in the background is, of course, Trine 2. As it always really has been. I mean, we used to do Minecraft, we did Guild Wars for a little while, but now we've seemed to settle on Trine 2. I don't know what we're going to do after this, because I'm pretty sure we're done the game now.
Yeah, I think this is the last bit.
Yeah, so I'm not entirely sure what game we'll do after this. We have Dungeon Defender, maybe. That might be a good idea.
Magicka, too.
Yeah, Magicka would be a pretty fun idea. But other than that, I really don't know.
We have to play it by ear.
Yeah.
Fly with the seat of our pants, which we're
If there are any games you guys would really like to see, perhaps, like, simple, very cheap games, let us know.
Yeah.
Because we might be able to do that for you guys. It all depends on what goes on. For instance, I wouldn't be all that opposed to Orcs Must Die 2.
Oh, yes, that would be freaking fun.
Yeah, whatever you guys want to see, just let us know. Okay, so, all that out of the way, the topic for this week.
Why don't you introduce it this time?
Okay, so the topic for this week, as indicated in the title of the actual video, so it comes to no surprise of any of you, would be the stereotypes present in the gaming world. Now, we've been dealing this since the inception of well, maybe not the very inception of gaming, because the very inception of gaming was Pong and didn't actually have any stereotypes to display, but there have been stereotypes that have been expressed in the gaming world and in gaming culture as at large. And this is generally a negative aspect of our, what would you call us? Our culture, really. I mean,
our pastime, our hobbies, our way of life, however you want to describe it.
And this moves a little bit beyond just video games, mind you. This also goes into gaming in general, tabletop gaming, card games, all that sorts of stuff. So, let's start off with, well, let's be frank, the sex, and I say sex inequality because of my bugbear in saying the word gender, because the word gender does not mean what people seem to think it means. But the inequality between men and women in gaming, and how women and even men can be featured in games. So, let's start off with that. So, Azilie, as a woman, how do you feel about how females are portrayed in video games?
I'm a little bit 50-50 on it. I mean, if you look at a lot of games, women are portrayed as, and I really don't want to say it this way either, but as sex objects. I mean, you see, like, the perfect image of a woman. It's large breasts, wide hips, narrow waist. I mean, not every woman looks like that. Let's be frank, but that is the ideal image that is portrayed in any game. And you look at Resident Evil, any of the women in those games are portrayed as athletic, perfect. Mass Effect, you've got Miranda, the perfect woman, the Asari.
Miranda is also genetically the perfect woman in that game.
We're not gonna go there, but, like, every female character you run into is portrayed as athletic, pretty, active, however you want to describe it.
So, yeah, but you can also flip that on its head. And now, I'm aware that...
Yes, you can.
Now, I'm aware that this is brought up a lot, like, in news or any case studies about video games. They always...
Or in feminist culture.
Yeah, they always bring up the objectification of women in video games. But you can flip it on its head and point out that this happens a lot to the guys, too. And, I mean, just look at, for instance, you brought up Resident Evil. Look at Chris Redfield.
Mass Effect, James Vega.
Or even Shepard. Shepard's kind of a really tough-cut, chiseled, military career man.
Yeah.
You've also got...
anybody from the Gears of War.
Yeah,
or,
the Gears of War guys are
God
basically walking fucking brick walls. So...
Built like a brick house!
So, really, the image of a guy and a girl in a video game is... It makes sense simply because of how our culture works. And this is more... this is more due to our culture and not due to gaming as a centralized thing. When you play a game, you want to play as a hero. You don't really want to play as the average Joe. You don't want to play with a guy with a beer gut because he's not all that impressive. You want to play with a guy who looks like he could punch out a crocodile if he had to. You want to play with a girl who can obviously sprint 100 miles and is very attractive
can handle a gun
to look at.
or handle herself.
You don't really want to play as Ugly Betty because that's not appealing to look at. That's not something you want to stare at a screen for 10 hours.
Now, I'm going to be completely honest. As much as I laugh at the idea of what you just said, you don't want to play as Ugly Betty, at the same time, I kind of wish that there were games where you could play as a character that didn't fit the expected view, and see how that character can overcome whatever the storyline is. And prove not just to what's going on in the game, but to gaming culture that you don't have to be attractive, you don't have to be physically cut to be the hero. That wouldn't be a bad thing to see.
Fair enough. But is there a market for that game?
That's the problem.
Question.
Yeah, that is the question.
Fact of the matter is, sex sells.
Yes.
I mean, in reality,
look at video games.
To see...
Look at the commercials we see on television every day. Sex sells. Makeup, clothing, television commercials for upcoming television shows or movies. It's like, even
really,
I remember there was this bit in for Gabriel Iglesias' skit when he was doing Pepsi. Psst. Ooh, Pepsi. It's like,
yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I remember what skit you're talking about.
I gotta get Pepsi.
We can't talk about that too much because copyright, but...
well, you get the idea, though. It's like sex sells.
But here's the thing. Is it really the fault of the corporations and the game designers and all, in the advertisement? Is it really their fault? No.
I honestly don't think that they're doing it deliberately. They don't do it deliberately.
Even if they're doing it deliberately, is it their fault? No, because they're trying to appeal to people and they're trying to sell their product.
They're trying to fit the niche.
They're doing their jobs. That's their job.
You
can't fault them for it.
They're filling the niche that's been created.
It's what people want. Right. It really is what people want. But even if you go back in time, I go back in time several centuries, you look at the best examples of heroes. You got Achilles. Odysseus. Hercules. They're all perfect examples of what a manly man is. And it's been that case throughout time, and it is going to be the case. A hero has to be heroic. That's just a trope that I don't think can be shaken.
Yeah.
So...
And unfortunately the same can be said with female characters.
Yeah. Mulan. Mulan was also she was a very attractive woman, and she kind of, she was basically everything a woman should be, but she was still a ferocious fighter. I'll give you that. But I guarantee if Mulan was depicted, she would be a very attractive woman. She'd be reasonably athletic. She wouldn't be displayed as an average, small, little, quaint woman who doesn't look like she could
pick up a stick and beat someone with it.
She would very much be portrayed as a very attractive, good-looking woman. Look at paintings of Joan of Arc. They're never portrayed as, the everyday housewife. They're always larger than life, super attractive people who look like they can get the job done.
Yeah.
So there you go. A fact on that. And then, of course, you have the stereotype of the stereotypical gamer.
Well, let's keep in mind with gaming, there are a couple of other things that are stereotyped as well before we actually hit on the game, the people behind the game, the people that are holding the controllers. What are some other stereotypes that go on within the game itself?
Okay, fair enough. We've
got the issue of gender, the argument of men versus women, and how they're portrayed in a game. We've got the argument of racism.
Before we move on to racism, I just want to quickly say, as far as we're concerned on the issue of sex and its inequality as displayed in video games, basically, it's rather even. Both sides get the blows, and it's what sells in the market, and it's really the hallmark of what a hero is. So there's not much that can be done to change it.
As far as it really seems, it's a formula that game developers have carved out based on the precursors, the great odysseys of Greek and Roman storytelling.
Yes,
all of those kind of things help create a formula that game developers now follow.
Yes, but we've basically summed it up. It's, it's this, this, and this. It really can't be changed. You have to have a really good-looking, strong guy and a really good-looking,
strong woman.
Yeah, you need powerful, larger-than-life characters who are top physical form to really sell a game. You need to have a hero.
Yeah.
You can't have, Mr. Beer Gut who, maybe goes at home and yells at his wife every day. You can't have the plain Mary Sue character who looks like he just picked up a stick from off the street and now is somehow going to magically save the world. Because you need, again, a hero. Players want to play a hero. So then, moving on to racism. Racism is present in games. Now,
quite prevalent.
Now, there are several different forms of racism in games. Now, when I say racism, I don't necessarily just mean what the media might indicate as racism, like the way that a certain race is portrayed in a game, like the way that that blacks are portrayed in a game, or the way that Spaniards are portrayed in the game. I mean, racism as a mechanic, racism as a plot device. Racism does exist in video games, intentionally and unintentionally.
Let's be honest, it has a big hold on things outside of the gaming world. Just look at Tolkien.
Yes, but
or D&D.
But let's move into before we discuss intentional racism, let's discuss unintentional racism.
Right. Okay.
So, unintentional racism is basically when you take a stereotype, like the stereotypical black guy, the grape drinking hood, and you put that in a video game. Now, this is what your idea of a black is. This is what your culture has kind of exposed to you, what a black person is. And so this is what you portrayed a black person as in your game. Now, this is
i.e. Grand Theft Auto. Yeah, was like a really good example.
Yeah, what's his name? Nick, I guess. He was kind of a very typical black thug kind of guy.
Yeah.
Now, they might not really intend to upset people with this, but it is kind of racist.
Offensive.
Yeah. And that stuff happens from time to time. There was a particular incident where there was a female... no, actually, I'm thinking of Pirates of the Caribbean, but this is still kind of relevant. It was the most recent Pirates of the Caribbean movie, Pirates of the Caribbean 4, where they had that female protagonist, the daughter of Blackbeard.
Yep.
And people were saying that they were portraying Hispanic people in a bad light because she acted like the stereotypical fiery-headed Spaniard woman, breaking into Spanish when she lost her temper and stuff like that. Now, what I realized when I was seeing these kinds of complaints is that these kinds of complaints typically came from white people. It wasn't actually Spanish people who were complaining about this. So I have to wonder if these racist comments, these cries of racism in certain games are just sometimes a case of what's the PC gone wrong, because if you really listen to people who speak a certain language and they have English as a second language, if they get emotionally distressed, they will start speaking in their native tongue. I've seen plenty of German people do it. I've seen plenty of Spanish people do it. If they get very upset at you, they will probably start shouting at you in another language. It does not matter what their race is.
Yeah. Like, my great-grandmother, used to speak Portuguese. And it wasn't her first language, but, she became quite fluent in it, and every once in a while, if you pissed her the fuck off, she'd start rapid fire Portuguese, and you'd be like, I don't understand a thing you're saying. Thinking back on it now, it's funny, and to me, like, seeing that kind of thing happen in that Pirates of the Caribbean movie, I found it amusing because I know that actually happened. It's not so much being stereotypical as it is true. And, that's kind of like a fine line, though.
Now, there is another instance, a rather famous instance, that relatively recently happened with Resident Evil 5. No. 5? Yes, 5. Resident Evil 5 took place in Africa. Now, as a result, you fought a lot of African people who are black. Let's face it, you're in an African setting, you are going to be fighting black people. Now, a lot of people saw this as, it might be, 2 white protagonists with guns blowing the brains out of a bunch of black people. However, what a lot of people seem to ignore is, first of all, this is the setting of the game. The game takes place in Africa. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have a bunch of white people mixed into the crowds, because there aren't a whole lot of white people in Africa. At least when you compare it to the black demographic.
Yeah.
So, I can understand why that situation happened. Whether or not you think it's racist, honestly ask yourself, if a game takes place in Africa,
9 times out of 10, you're going to be dealing with
black people.
The people native to that country. If the game takes place in Spain or
China or
the
Russia,
Middle East, you're going to see a big demographic of the people native to that area in the game.
I mean, the only reason why I even saw this coming up is because it was white people killing black people. This is ignoring the fact that Sheva is black. No, Sheva's black or Egyptian?
Egyptian, I think.
She was dark. She was darker skinned.
I'm not entirely positive.
But first of all, one of the main characters wasn't even white. Yeah. Second of all, it was the fact that it was a white guy killing black people that got everybody up in arms. If we switched the roles, if we had black people shooting a bunch of white people, you really wouldn't have seen an eye bat. Conversely, if this game took place in America, or if it took place in Britain, or if it took place in Russia, again, nobody would have said anything.
Again, I think that really comes back down to the PC crowd getting up in arms. And again, like you brought up earlier, 9 times out of 10, it's probably going to be more white people of Caucasian origins that are the ones getting up in arms. And
so
I'm not even sure if there's a term to correctly put to this.
So what it came down to, I really don't have a problem with this being in a game. I don't really have a problem with white people dying in a video game. I also don't see it as a problem with black people dying in a video game. It's just part of the game. It's not a political statement. They aren't going out of their way to saying that white people
are better than black people,
or that black people are mindless zombies and deserve to be slaughtered by.
Yeah.
It's
part of. Right,
it's just a matter of the fact that the game.
They're in Africa. These people have become zombies, and these people are taking care of it. That's all it is.
You know, really, it never even occurred to me, because I no longer really think in terms like that. I'm actually having a hard time saying white people and black people right now, because I don't really see people like that. I see people. I've never really...
Skin color is just a coincidence.
Like, whenever I had to... I used to work at a major retail store, and whenever I had to describe somebody to our security, race was always the last thing I brought up, because it was always the last thing I thought about. Like, you would think that's a major thing that you should say, like, if you see somebody shoplift something, probably the first thing you might want to tell the TPS officer, which is Protective Service Officer, is that, well, it was a black guy, so that they know how to look for a black guy. But that never really occurred to me, because I just saw a person might have stole something. I never really thought of it in race. So,
but unfortunately, not a lot of people do that, though, and that's where this problem really starts. Yeah. People don't think of each other as we're all human, we're all people. No, we separate it and segregate each other by, you're this color, you're this color, you're this ethnicity, you're that ethnicity, you're that sexual orientation, you're that sexual orientation, and we just separate people into all these little categories. It's like, we're all freaking human. Treat each other like that, and we'll all be better! Sorry! Yeah, the world will be peaceful and butterflies and rainbows or some shit!
So as far as I was concerned, I was shooting people who had the misfortune of being zombies. I wasn't thinking of, oh, I'm a white guy killing a bunch of black people. It just never even
that's no different
came
than
across
if
my brain.
You think about it in Left 4 Dead, like, most of the demographic of the characters that were zombies in Left 4 Dead were white people.
Yeah.
You didn't see a lot of other ethnicities in that game unless you were the protagonist characters.
Which, granted, that took place in America, so it does make sense that most of the zombies were white people. So
right, but again, it's like, you don't think about it.
Yeah,
they're zombies,
it just never
but
occurred to me.
The minute they're a different skin tone, that's when people throw a fit. So, that doesn't make sense to me. I'm sorry.
Now that we've gotten that out of the way, the unintentional racism stuff, let's talk about racism that is intended to be in a game. Now, we're not saying, like, somebody made a game and they're intentionally portraying black people or Spanish people in a bad light. What they're playing, their game takes place in an era where racism existed. For instance, in Assassin's Creed 3. Now, I haven't actually run into any explicit examples of this, but Assassin's Creed 3 takes place in the colonial era, where there was a lot of racism against black people.
Yeah.
Now, I've yet to see it in a game, and I haven't seen any big media explosions of it, but this does actually happen in that era. Now, what do you think of racism that is intended because it's era appropriate?
I can't think of any game that really hits it, but if any game that really touches base upon the Crusades.
Okay, let me flip around. Where racism is setting appropriate. For instance, fantasy games where elves and dwarves hate each other on a sheer racial basis. They're constantly making fun of one another. I was only using blacks because it was relevant to what we had already said.
Right.
It does expand into the fantasy setting where certain specific races hate each other.
Yeah.
And
Tolkien is a prime example where you've got the dwarves against the elves, or even...
It's a little less present in Tolkien's work simply because you followed the main group of characters around quite a lot, and they didn't really do it too much.
Right, but if you do take into consideration backstory, things like in the Silmarillion that explain
it's a little more present in The Hobbit, really.
Yeah, yes, okay,
because the way that the what would you call
company.
The company
reacts
treats
to the people
elves
that
they deal with, and when they finally get the treasure. By the way, if anybody cries spoiler on this, I will ban you from my comment session, because if you do not know The Hobbit by now, pick up a frickin' book, man! Seriously. If you don't know the story of The Hobbit by now, that's on you. The author has died. That book is older than I am.
It's going on like its 75th anniversary?
Yeah. So, whatever.
Anyway, but, like, Tolkien is a great example of intentional,
Forgotten Realms.
Racism. Anything related to D&D.
Yes.
It's not just Forgotten Realms, it's all of them.
Well, there were also, and I love to bring up BioWare again, so there was really, really good examples in Dragon Age.
Mm-hmm.
There was racism present throughout that entire game, which was racism against the elves.
Even Mass Effect showed it, the humans versus Batarians, that animosity between the Turians and the humans.
It was a little bit more present at least from what I saw. I didn't really see too much human to Batarian hate, but I definitely saw a lot of...
Krogan, Turian, Solarian?
Well, I definitely saw a lot of Batarian to human hate.
Well,
now,
yes.
Naturally, there was also Cerberus, which hated everyone. But there was a lot of specific examples of Batarians being very racist towards humans. There was a lot of instances of humans being racist towards, I think it was specifically Asari. I didn't see a whole lot of Turian hate. There was some Krogan hate, but not so much from the humans. It was Solarian towards Krogan.
And vice versa.
And there was also a lot of Krogan hate towards Turians, and yeah, it all kind of...
Well, that's all genophage related, but that's neither here nor there.
Fact of the matter is, stuff like that can actually help enrich the game. It can make it a little bit more realistic, because there are racial tensions in the real world. It does happen. So when we see...
What's happening in the Middle East right now between Gaza and Israel is a perfect example.
Well, I say, and I'm probably going to make somebody upset with this, but I do believe that the problem with Israel and Gaza is a little less racial and a little more religious.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because I'm pretty sure if there were people of a Middle Eastern descent that are Jewish who lived in Israel, they probably wouldn't be seeing the same hate from Israelites that's displayed towards Muslims. Vice versa, people of a Jewish descent that live in Gaza that are Muslims might not receive the same hate that a Jewish person would.
Yeah.
So, I think that's a little bit more religiously charged than racially charged.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that.
But you do see, especially in America, in the UK, you've seen a lot of racial hate towards the Arabic people.
I see it in my workplace. I see it in my workplace every damn day, and it makes me so goddamn pissed. I'm sorry. I'm not to go off on a cussing fest, but I really, really wish I could just punch some of the people in the face that I wish I could punch them in the face.
Now, a little bit more. I wouldn't say the same for the Arabic people, and I'll tell you why. It's not the Arabic people hating whites, it's specifically radical Muslims disliking Western culture. And it doesn't matter what color you are. They hate our culture, they don't hate our skin color. Whereas, quite often, all too often, in this country and in other countries, we may persecute a Middle Eastern person just for their color. It doesn't matter if they're a Christian, if they're an atheist, it doesn't really matter. We're so focused on skin color still, and racism is still an issue even
You'd think
today.
that we'd have grown out of that kind of bullshit, but... Wake up, America! Come on!
But you also nowadays have the people who compensate in the complete opposite direction. They see anything that might display another race in a negative light, regardless of the actual meaning behind it, they flip out over. So, but we are kind of already all discussed that.
Yeah. Well, that's
racism as a mechanic.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of like if you're trying to portray Nazis in a video game, people throw a fit, whether or not it's done in a historically accurate light or not. It's just...
Well, personally, when it comes to Nazis in video games, I just think that's the most lazy enemy you can pick.
Yeah.
You're not really, relying on good storytelling. You're not really relying on any...
You're relying
on the fact that...
hatred.
Yeah, you're relying on the ancient hatred of the Nazis. That's just lazy game design, in my opinion. But that's enough about Nazis. Yeah. We don't need our video banned in Germany. No, seriously.
Yeah.
Nazi anything is literally banned in Germany. The Castle Wolfenstein, you can't play in Germany. I'm not even sure if you can get a hold of that sniper game that came out not too long ago in Germany. Or if you can, they've probably removed most of the Nazi iconography from it. So
I don't know.
Sniper Elite 2. That's the game.
Yeah, I was thinking it was going to be Sniper Elite, but I wasn't sure.
Anyway.
I didn't want to open my mouth and put my foot in it.
Another great game that uses racism to create a living, breathing world is anything from the Elder Scrolls series.
Yes.
Those games do feel very realistic. They feel like they're actually alive simply because of the fact that they're... I mean, racial tension is not the only thing in these games that make them great, but the fact that it's there is really cool.
It just adds that little bit of depth that really pulls you deeper.
You can't realistically expect all these races, all these different people with various different cultures, various different backgrounds, and various
beliefs
different
and
political systems to get along and for it to all be sunshine and roses.
Yes.
Like if that actually happens in a game, it kind of pulls me out of it. The
dystopian city of the future.
Yeah, if I actually see a video game where the dwarves and the elves are getting along buddy-buddy and they're, all happy and sunshine and rainbows with one another, I'm gonna call foul. I think that's kind of BS.
Yeah.
Because it just doesn't feel right. If there are multiple different races in a game, they probably should have some interracial feuding, simply because
Guild Wars.
Happens.
Guild Wars is a great example. The first game was
even though all the races in that game get along now, you can still get the sensation of
there's still
semi-racial tension.
Like you walk through.
Just look at how Char treat humans.
Yeah, I was just about to say, you walk through the Char starting point, and you listen to the NPCs. If they're dealing with a human NPC, you can see a different type of reaction than when they're dealing with another Char or when they're dealing with an Asura.
Yeah.
It's like, this is interesting.
Not to mention Asura are midget little bastards with an arrogant streak a mile long. No, seriously, have you ever listened?
That's an aspect of that race that's really interesting, and that's an option to open up that racial stereotyping that would make the game a little bit more interesting if you looked at it, dug a little deeper into it, and made something out of it.
So as far as I'm concerned, as far as racism as a mechanic in a game, well, it might not necessarily be PC and it might offend some people. Fact of the matter is, especially when it's a period-appropriate game, if you don't have it in a game, it's it makes for a hollow world, and it makes for a much less realistic world. If you have a video game set in colonial America and there's no sign of the slave trade and there's no sign of the way that blacks were treated back in that era, if the blacks are living alongside the whites happy and healthy, then it's not a accurate representation of the times. Likewise, if you have a video game set in the medieval era and you have a very, very strong, heroic female protagonist that has all the rights of a man does, then it's not accurately portraying the medieval era of the time. Yes, you can have a female protagonist, but you have to kind of treat her as females were treated back in the game. Sure, she can kick ass and do whatever, but she's not going to be treated politically, socially the same way that a man would.
Yeah. I think that it's one thing that's kind of offset me when it comes to doing tabletop games in fantasy genres where most of the time female characters are treated on that level plane. For once, I would actually like to get involved in a tabletop game where you see that tier level. I would love to get involved in that kind of setting and see how exactly would you...
Because you could take that mechanic and you could actually try to strive against that female stereotype of the era, and you could try to prove the worth of a woman in that instance. That might be the wrong way to say that, but you get my meaning. You could actually try to show how powerful a woman could be in a environment that is actually hostile to independent women, which would be an interesting thing. I'd like to see a game set in medieval Europe that actually kind of has that as a story plot element, where you're
not so much have that Mulan experience, but that Mulan experience,
something like that. I think
Disney
that would be
did a very
pretty decent.
good for a Disney movie...
Don't give all the credit to Disney, because that story does predate Disney.
No, I understand that, but for what Disney could do to show that kind of, class leveling, I guess you could say, and still make it kid-friendly, they did a really good job.
Yes, they did display that there was a disparity between men and women.
And not only the disparity between men and women, but keep in mind also the ethnic side of things, where this is China.
Yes.
And that was how things are.
And they didn't display China in a negative light either.
No, they didn't.
So that was a very well done movie, and it's a good idea that you pointed that out. That was a very well done movie. It demonstrated that era appropriately. There was a disparity between men and women of that era, and there was a woman who stood up for a woman's rights and stood up for her family.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very good example, and I'd like to play a video game where you could do that. You know, where, yes, it's going to display the fact that during this era there was a disparity between men and women, appropriately, because that's what happened in that era. You're not going to have men and women on an equal playing field simply because that's what occurred down then.
Yeah.
But you can always try to flip the stereotype on its head and actually have the woman rebel against the stereotype. That'd be pretty cool.
Yes.
And there are instances in some tabletops where that's exactly true, but I'm not going to bore our audience with that right now. Yeah. Just look at Exalted and certain specific settings in Exalted, which is a White Wolf game.
Yes.
Where that kind of culture is present. But moving on. Sexuality stereotypes.
This is kind of iffy ground, I guess you could say. A lot of games, recently anyway, have started to do the sexuality beat around the bush kind of thing, pardon the pun. You've got homosexual relationships being shown more often, i.e. a lot of the BioWare games have been
typically
doing that.
Only in RPGs.
Right, but you get my meaning. You see that a lot in Dragon Age. You saw it in Mass Effect. There's the transgendered characters. I can't think of any names right now because they're like completely escaping me.
There's a few. There's Birdo.
Yeah, I was thinking like there's one in one of the fighting games.
Poison's the one from the fighting game you're thinking of.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like there are stereotypes related to these sexual orientations.
Now, in modern games, you don't really see the stereotypes as much. They're actually displaying homosexual people as normal, everyday people. But there have been some instances. For instance, there's been some gay characters in some video games, and I specifically say male gay, because lesbianism is...
Let me just cut you off right there. In gaming, if you actually had to put it on a tier level, lesbians would be the most accepted sexuality beneath heterosexuals.
I'm just saying, if you think of America's, and I guess the UK's, stereotypical lesbian, which is the butch lady,
yeah,
you don't see that in games.
Yeah.
I'm referring to the stereotype of the fairy guy.
Oh, yeah, okay.
You do see that. You don't see that much now, but you have seen it in the past.
Wasn't that gay Tony in, like, the Grand
Yes,
Theft
I
Auto?
believe
He's
that
the
did
owner
occur.
Of the,
and unfortunately,
that
that's the only example specifically I have in my mind.
Yeah.
I know it's happened in other places, I just couldn't tell you.
Well, what was that? That... Oh my god, I can't remember the name of it. You were playing it, like, a while ago. It was this older game, and it had this, it was this fighting game, and there were these two guys that were, like, fabulous! And I can't for the life of me remember the name of the game. Like, you got to beat the snot out of anybody you ran into on this game. And for the life of me, it's gonna bug me. I can't remember the name of the game.
I can't remember what you're talking about.
Oh, I'm pretty sure you played it. I can't remember the name of it, but basically there are more
in the past,
instances of it.
In the past, when gay male characters have been displayed, they've always kind of been displayed as the very fabulous, I fart rainbows gay guy.
Yeah.
As opposed to what gay people generally actually are. Now, this seems to be less of a problem now, so we really don't have much of a reason to discuss it anymore. But
that's up for debate. You can...
I'm just referring to the stereotypical negative display of a homosexual male or a homosexual female. You don't really see that in games now.
No, thankfully. But you do still see some slip-ups.
Yes,
like,
certainly. Like, for instance, the fact that there is very, very few gay options for guys in most games now for homosexual people, whereas there are plenty of lesbian selections.
Mass Effect is a perfect example. You can start off right from Mass Effect 1 with a lesbian relationship.
I will debate that to the death because I do not see Asari as female.
We're not gonna go into that. To most of the public who aren't seeing it as the gamer and understanding the background to it, they see it as a lesbian relationship.
Fair enough.
So
it's just,
you've got that all the way through all three games. However,
just let me really quick. It's just from somebody who has designed worlds before, who understands the idea of a monogendered culture and stuff like that. I can see how a developer would feel that it's not lesbianism when there is only one gender. They're not technically female.
That's debating semantics, and let's.
But
there is an argument going around that BioWare slipped up with that by calling it the lesbian relationship of the game.
Yeah,
however, the other issue that they slipped up in was throughout all three games, or throughout 2 of the 3 games, if you're playing a male shepherd, there was no gay option for male shepherd up until the 3rd game, where suddenly Caden comes out of the closet.
Yeah, it was a forced gay character. It wasn't just like...
That scenario irritates me.
Yeah, that scenario was actually kind of arbitrarily crafted just to provide another gay character. Not to mention, spoiler, but this game's been out for quite a while. If Caden dies, you don't even have that option.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Caden can die in the first game, and you won't have him in the next 2. So, that can immediately reduce your options right there, leaving you down to only one gay option in the 3rd game, which is, what's his name? Cortez. So, there you go. Whereas in... You have 1, 2, 3, at least 3.
In the first game, you had Liara. In the second game, you had the options of Miranda, Jack, and...
Stop tapping me.
Sorry. You had the options of Miranda, Jack, and Kelly. And then...
No, Miranda and Jack would not sleep with a female.
Oh, they wouldn't?
No, you had Liara, you had the Justicar.
Justicar wouldn't do it either.
No, but you could form a relationship with her.
Right, but she wouldn't do anything.
It was still considered a romance option.
Oh, yeah.
You also had the...
Morinth, but if you didn't know with Morinth, you're dead!
Yeah, that would kill you. Shoot. You technically had Kelly, regardless of which sex you were.
Yeah, Kelly would just swing either way. She was a funny little troll.
And then in the 3rd one, you had the new psychologist who was purely lesbian. No bisexuality
Samantha
there.
Trainer.
And then, of course, you had the same romance options as before for female.
Yeah.
So, there were far more lesbian options than there were gay options.
by far.
Yes.
And that is a sexuality stereotype where when it comes to the relationships in a video game, you're going to see the heterosexual relationships or a lesbian relationship over a gay or a transgender.
But we're still moving, we've definitely moved beyond the realm of how stereotypes are portrayed.
Yeah.
Which is really our central topic. Now, as far as how stereotypes are portrayed, the people who have really kind of gotten the shaft are the transsexuals. Because, for instance, you look at Birdo. Now, Birdo, canonically, is a boy who feels like a girl.
Yeah.
Now, normally with transsexual people, it's a male or a female that feels like they're trapped in the wrong body. So, while the person might be biologically male, they feel like they should be female, or vice versa. Female feels like that they should be male. Now, some people do in real world overcompensate for this. I know a couple of people who do overcompensate for it.
We both
but
do.
I'm not going to discuss those people. But there are other people who accept this as a fact. They eventually go through their lives, they eventually take that step, and they change, but they're still themselves. Granted, they're now a guy or a girl now, but they don't try to over-express their femininity or masculinity like Birdo has. Birdo has become a pink bow-wearing creature with a large mouth that spits eggs. Yeah! And then you have Poison, who is a male to female transsexual. In America, she's post-op. In Japan, she's pre-op. But has very much played up the feminine aspect. She's wearing tight clothing. She has massive tracts of land.
That's what we're calling it now. I see.
Very skimpy clothing and a very overly feminine attitude in the game. Yeah. So, yeah, they kind of get a little bit of the shaft in those kinds of games. You also don't see very many female to male transsexuals in video gaming. No. I actually can't think of a single example.
I don't think there are any. I really don't. I think it's usually only male to female because it's deemed the more attractive.
Fair enough.
Of the options, and I really feel bad for saying it like that. But if you asked anybody,
but basically
that would be the preference.
They display the very stereotype transsexual. The almost street prostitute transsexual, which is kind of disparaging. It's kind of concerning. Yeah. But that's the only kind of transsexual you get in the game. You see that
more often than not when in something like Law and Order SVU or
yes,
NCIS.
But that more makes sense because those are the kinds of people that those officers would deal with on a regular basis. And there are people who are the better, well-adjusted transsexuals that are displayed in that series, so I don't think that's a valid criticism.
Well, no, I'm saying though, like there were a couple of episodes I remember seeing where it's like the stereotypical view of the man.
Hey.
I sound like that, yeah.
Basically,
the guy who's going from man to woman and really forcing.
Yes.
The appearance.
And that's typically what shows up in games. You don't see the well-adjusted transsexuals who have basically retained their identity, that don't try to force a feminine or masculine aspect.
Yeah.
Who aren't overcompensating because they feel that they have to. But now that we've discussed games, and quite interesting, I didn't think that this would happen. But, now that we've discussed games, let's discuss gaming culture at large. The people behind
the controllers. And behind the computer screen.
Now, quite frankly, and I'm ashamed to admit this, gaming culture is incredibly racist, sexist, and homophobic. We really are. And it's not the mature gamers, the gamers that Azilie and I normally deal with. It's not probably most of the people watching our videos right now. Is we tend to have a actual rather mature audience for the Cyan Firefly, and I'm quite happy about that. I'm glad you guys are generally the more adult crowd. Good on you. However, there are quite a few, typically, not always, younger gamers
or the obsessive crowd
who use homophobic slurs. They don't feel women should play video games. They don't feel that there should be strong female protagonists. They only see females as sex objects and stuff like that, which is what the aforementioned gaming companies have to cater to, have to make their profits off of.
Yeah, because unfortunately, it's not the adult gamers, the people that are more mature, that are vocal. They're the ones that are happy with what they're playing. They don't speak out. The people that are upset are the ones that are going to be the most bitchy, vocal people, and the bitchy, vocalized, angry slurs and what have you are what's going to meet the PR guys and the developers' ears.
I mean, go on to any FPS and actually listen to what people are saying on the mic. You'll always hear very disparaging words. You know, you'll constantly hear people shouting faggot and stuff like that back and forth. You know, go suck up. And I'm not going to say the word on this podcast because I think we're a little bit more clean than that. But, you know, go suck a stick, we'll say. Go suck a phallic object or, you know, stuff like that. Or if there's a woman playing, they'll say stuff like, go back to the kitchen, what are you doing on here?
Or any sort of misogynistic terms.
And I think this also ties into internet culture because...
Very much so.
The vast majority of gamers are also very present in internet culture, which is both a good and a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you see a lot of these ideas on gaming forums and on non-gaming forums, and people use this whole anonymous identity because there is an anonymous identity in video games as well as online to hide behind this misogynistic, racist stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I can't tell you how many times I've gone to websites and I've seen the N-word plastered everywhere. You know, people who actually ask for games designed where you can kill black people for the sake of killing black people, rather than there just happens to be a black person in the game that you have to kill. You know, it's very unfortunate that this exists in our culture, and we should really try everything we can to try to expunge that from our culture.
Exactly. And the unfortunate side of it is, that's the side of the culture that the news and government has latched onto.
Mm.
I mean, like, before we even started recording this, I was listening to a podcast of a woman that, now while she is heavily involved in the feminist movement, she's also a gamer, and she wanted to really bring attention to the fact that there is, at least in her view, a lot of sexism and misogyny in video games. Now, the unfortunate side is, like, this is her opinion, but people were going after this woman with death threats, and they were going out of their way to take and make pictures of this woman being raped by video game characters.
Now, I listened to the same podcast that she did because, granted, I was playing Assassin's Creed 3 at the time, but I was still paying a lot of attention to what Azilie was listening to. And the funny thing about this woman is that she was not asking for games to change, necessarily. If people want to play the oversexed, a lot of the stuff that we play now, that's fine. She was just asking for more games that display...
that cater to the
people who want to play something different. Yeah. She wasn't demanding that these games no longer be produced. She just wants more games that cater to her demographic, which isn't an unreasonable request whatsoever.
Exactly. And I was sitting there listening to it, and I'm like, I kind of feel appalled to be a gamer, and not just a female gamer, but a gamer in general, because it's like, these are the people that we're surrounded by. These are the people that
we associate with.
We associate with probably on a daily basis, and we don't even realize it. And these are the people that are giving us bad names.
Mm-hmm.
We could be covered in halos, farted out from God as, like, pure crystal goodness.
We could be christened as saints, and we would still have a black mark of being gamers because of how gamer culture represents itself at the moment.
Yes, and
it does us no good.
Yeah, exactly. Like, a lot of the times, if you go into a public setting, I bet you 9 times out of 10, you will not willingly say, oh, I play video games. You'll go out of your way to make up a hobby, or give the most boring hobby.
Some people will and some people won't. It depends on who you're surrounded by, mind you.
Like,
but for instance,
exactly,
at a posh dinner party, I would probably not want to mention that I play video games, because people of that society are likely to look down on me because they see how other gamers act.
Right. But if you're surrounded by other gamers, or people that you're very close to...
or even just young teenagers or stuff like that, normal, everyday people, well, not even normal, everyday people, I probably wouldn't want to tell somebody I just met that I'm a gamer.
Yeah.
Especially if they were, 30, 40. Because that might reflect badly on me. They might think that I'm like the stereotypical young, annoying, racist, sexually biased gamer. It's a little less harsh on the women, because female gamers are seen a little differently than male gamers are at the moment.
Yeah. I don't know. This isn't a very iffy topic.
Yes, it is. Now let's address some of the stereotypes that are against gamers, and we're not just talking about racist and gender and stuff like that. There are some stereotypes against gamers that are completely unfounded, that have nothing to do with some very vocal people and stuff like that. For instance, there is some major...
figures?
No, not figures. There are some major... I don't want to use the word misgivings. There are some major misinformation about our culture that people seem to have. For instance, a lot of people seem to think that because gamers play violent video games, we're all violent people. Now, we've already addressed this in a previous...
Yeah, we've addressed this in a couple of different videos. There's no reason to beat the already dead horse.
We've bought the farm and sown the wheat on that one.
We've beaten that horse.
Yeah, we've not only beaten the horse, we've
beaten it so far it's been buried twice.
No, we've turned it into a piñata and made glue out of it.
And PETA's now calling us.
I could not give a rat's ass about PETA. I'm surprised they haven't flipped out about Assassin's Creed 3 yet.
Oh my god.
Because you can hunt things in Assassin's Creed 3. There also seems to be a popular idea that there are no female gamers. This comes from both outside gaming culture and within gaming culture. And if female gamers are acknowledged, they're always seen as casuals.
Yeah, there's no such thing. a lot of people can say there's no such thing as a hardcore gamer girl. Like, you could even go, like, I've seen a lot of the stuff on, what the hell is that website? It's part of the worst customer...
Not Always Right.
Part of the Not Always Right series. One of the websites is related to customer service and the workplace. Well, a lot of the gaming related ones are actually coming from women who are going into places like GameStop and having the guys behind the counter asking, "Oh, you're buying Call of Duty? What's it for? Your boyfriend?"
Yeah, I mean...
And it's like, no, I'm buying this for me. Oh, girls don't play FPSs. You're buying it for your boyfriend, huh? And it's like, really? It always impresses me, but at the same time, just makes me want to beat somebody with a stick, that these kinds of people exist.
I know there's quite a few girls out there who could probably kick my ass at Call of Duty, mainly because I'm not a big Call of Duty fan, but the fact remains.
Well, the fact remains, 3 out of 10 gamers are going to be women.
Yeah.
That's fact.
There's also the fact that 4 out of every 10 women, at least in America, play video games.
Yes.
Some of them are hardcore gamers. Some of them are casters, like you and I. Dodger. Trish and Chib.
Felicia Day.
Yes, Felicia Day. That's a very good example. There are some very famous gamers out there who are female. There is a all-women's team of very hardcore StarCraft players. I can't remember what their names are off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
But they're national champions. They are very, very good gamers. Moving on from that, there's the idea that gamers are socially awkward or antisocial, which is
bullshit.
Far from the truth. We are actually some of the most social people on the planet.
87% of gamers have 3 or more close friends. Now, this is also on top of the fact that gamers are more likely to create relationships because of the media that we are primarily using, be it the internet or Xbox Live or the PlayStation Network or whatever it is the Wii has.
And especially with the way that games are going right now, is that most games are networked in, that you are constantly exposed to other people who play the same kind of games that you do. So you are far...
Steam is like a perfect example. You can search for people who are gonna play the same games like you. You like to play Bastion. Somebody else is gonna play Bastion too. You can go find them.
I mean, yes. Granted, we have internal strife, as we always do, but. Like, for instance, PC purists versus console gamers.
Oh God!
So
I'm not touching that bad boy.
So there is some internal strife out there, but it's a lot less than people who consume other types of media. I can tell you that much. I mean, just look at sports fans. Sports fans, by their very nature, have much smaller secular groups, and they are kind of engineered to hate one another, as opposed to gamers who generally just get along because they all like games. There are some people who are dicks and hate people who don't like the kind of game they play.
Yeah.
So, yes, we do have that, but in general, we are far more likely to bond over games than we are to argue over them in our particular culture. So, we are actually indeed far more social than other non-gaming related cultures.
Yeah, well, gamers are 4% more likely to join a club.
Yep.
More often than not, that club's probably going to be related to gaming or some close venue to that, but still, I know that back in high school, the gaming club for us was freaking huge.
Yeah, but we're not going to discuss that gaming club.
No, but I'm just saying though, it's like
it was incredibly huge. Our little group of friends, and I say little in air quotes because we actually had a massive group of friends in high school. We had
30 plus friends in high school.
Yeah, our network of friends grew massively in high school. We knew people from every single grade level, freshman, junior, senior, sophomore, and we were friends with a lot of people in high school. We have since then grown unattached from quite a few of them, but while we were in high school, we had quite a few friends, and part of it was
compared
to do
most
with the
other
commonalities and interests, especially when it came to gaming and other nerdy type stuff.
Well, comparatively, we were also the group that was more open to accepting other people too.
Yes.
If you had a new kid trying to get into the school lifestyle, however you want to describe it, 9 times out of 10, the gamers and the nerds and the geeks, or however you want to describe them, are going to be the first people to say, "Hi, how are you doing? Let me show you around," compared to somebody who is going to be in the football team or a cheerleader.
Yes. Gamers are less Azilie has a fact sheet for us again. Okay, so your next point under socially awkward or antisocial is gamers are 2% less likely to forget details like names, dates, or trivia. I think that should be under the next topic that I'm going to bring up, which is games apparently rot your brain. Now, this is a long, old, ancient wives' tale, really. It's the same with TV rots your brain and stuff like that. It's fact of the matter is, it's not true.
No.
Gamers are far more likely to take up the arts. They're far more likely to pursue intellectual pursuits, such as computing, programming, stuff like that.
They're far more likely to be better at things like arithmetic or
math or maths if you're from the UK.
Yeah. Anything related to numbers or, again, like you said, computing, they're going to probably be better at it. Like, I know as somebody who is into the arts, I draw all the time. I play the clarinet. I sing. I mean, I'm heavily into the arts. I love to paint. I love to draw. It's just, for me, this is what I do in my free time, and a lot of the stuff that I base my creativity off of is some of the games that I play. Like, they help spark the imagination and say, "That's cool. Let me see if I can do something better."
Which your last bulletin here, gamers are 5% more likely to take up an instrument or sing in their spare time. And I know for a fact that a lot of musical people do tend to be gamers. For instance, our friend Dan Bull. He is a very big gamer. He has an entire channel dedicated to gaming. I know for a fact that some famous musicians also do a lot of gaming. Jack Black, for instance, is a pretty decent gamer. He actually worked on a couple of, one video game in particular. I can't remember what it's called. I know Ozzy Osbourne has played a couple of games in this time. I do know for a matter of the fact that a very new and up-and-coming artist, Lindsay Stomp, plays quite a few video games.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
I also know that, what's his name? Eric Speed plays video games. So, musical people do tend to play video games a lot because it does help the creative flow. So, we are not stupid. We are actually incredibly bright. And in fact, people who play video games have made incredible leaps and bounds in sciences, in computing, and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure Steve Jobs, before he died, played quite a few video games. And I'm sure Bill Gates plays video games. So there you go.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure if he could, Stephen Hawking would play video games.
I'm pretty sure that he's figured out a way to set up that chair to play video games. Maybe. Don't count him out yet. Don't count him out.
I could just picture him.
Remember what Howard Wolowitz said.
With that little pad thing he has, playing Angry Birds somehow. Just using pure brain power.
Oh, Jesus. One of the other, stereotypes is, like, gamers can't distinguish reality from fantasy. It's like, no! We can! We can! What are you talking about?
Yeah, studies show that by playing games, gamers are actually better equipped to understand the difference between reality and fantasy. Yes, we are capable of generating elaborate fantasy plots in our head. We are quite imaginative people, but we are very capable of separating ourselves from that fantasy. There are some people who generate fantasies in their head and they can't get their minds out of those fantasies. They stalk people because they perceive that they have a relationship with them, or they believe things that aren't necessarily true and stuff like that. You see this less in the gaming crowd because we are more detail oriented. We are capable of separating stuff that we invent in our head from things that are actually going around in the world around us. We are capable quite easily of living in two worlds at once. There are many times where I can walk down the street and I can invent this elaborate scenario going on around me, but I still can keep the presence of mind to do stuff in the real world. Like, I worked in that major retail store that I was telling you about. If I wasn't a gamer, if I couldn't invent these elaborate scenarios and actually manage to keep my mind still grounded in reality as well, I would have been fired within week 1.
Yup.
Further studies show that what gamers experience in their game actually helps them deal with real-life scenarios. Think pre-planning via pixels. Could you elaborate on that one?
Well, we kind of hit this point when we were discussing horror games. How people will play a horror game and,
Yes, okay, yeah, to better explore their fears and master them. Okay, I can,
right,
I
and,
can
also
understand that.
See a situation in a video game and then figure out how to say, okay, this happened here. Well, I'm
apply this to real life properly?
I'm suffering from this problem in real life. The scenarios are similar. What out of this game scenario can I apply to my real life problem?
Yes.
And people have been doing this successfully. And keep in mind that these solutions
don't always involve shooting people in the face. Games are a little more realistic than that. Alright. Gamers are addicted to their pastime.
This is one that I think is really interesting, and this might be a subject for an entire topic all on itself. The idea that somehow gamers are addicted to their consoles, or that people are addicted to the internet for all intents and purposes. I don't think that's really true. I really don't.
Well, it's true, but it's not true. There is 2 different types of addiction in my experience. There is literal, physical, chemical addiction.
Right. The kind that makes you suffer from withdrawals if you don't get that next
there's alcoholics, there's, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then there's another form of addiction which is less quantifiable. Now, this kind of addiction is not a clinical issue. It's not an issue of, you need to have this to survive. It's a mental state that requires willpower to break out of. There's nothing preventing somebody who is addicted to video games or addicted to gambling to actually master their problem. It's just a matter of weak willpower. Basically, they find this kind of thing enjoyable, and they don't want to give it up.
Yeah.
And they will do it to the detriment of their own lives. So while it is addiction, I feel that it is the problem of the person. It is a case of weak willpower on their aspect. It is not a fault of the game. It is not built into the culture of gaming. It is not something that is the fault of game programmers or anything like that. That is a problem with individual people who just flat out don't know when to stop. And if they weren't addicted to games, they'd be addicted to something else. They'd be addicted to gambling, they'd be addicted to eating, they'd be addicted to whatever. Right. And that's all addicted with air quotes.
Yeah. I know that there have been some case studies that I'm trying to think of like the best way to describe this. The news has gotten a hold of cases of somebody who's been obsessively playing WoW or some other game, and they immediately blame the game if something bad happens to the person. Well, they never go into detail and trying to think, well, maybe it's something underlying that caused them, that drove them to the game as an outlet.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Basically, gaming addiction might not necessarily be an actual problem as it might be a symptom of a greater problem. For instance, I suffer from something called generalized anxiety disorder, whereas I occasionally get these bouts where I get really, really anxious, where my fight or flight reflexes will jump into play. And I have a very easy way of dealing with that. I can hop onto my computer, I can play a video game, and I can do that until that sensation passes. Now, there are some other people who have bigger problems than I do. They have general depression. They're
stressed. They're overworked. It can be a whole slew of things that causes them to go to a game or
for perhaps the bottle or other things like obsessively eating, stuff like that. These are they might not necessarily be actual addictions. It's just a coping mechanism that's gone a little too far.
Right, exactly.
So, there you go. That's the other side of it. That's another possible explanation. Psychologists, take a look into that.
Well, there have been some psychologists that have looked into it and are still looking into it. The problem is that nobody really wants... It's either between nobody wants to really look at the findings and say, okay, yeah, this could be what's going on, or that information just isn't being made public.
Fair enough. But I think we've kind of exhausted the topic for the moment. As it comes down to, we basically feel there are some stereotypes present in games. They are mostly dealt with. Some of them are necessary to make a decent game.
Mm-hmm.
There are definitely stereotypes that come out of the gamer culture. There are some extremely loud people who can be very racist, can be very sexist, and stuff like that. And there are some definite stereotypes on gaming culture that are pretty much unfounded. So, there we go. We have been talking for quite a while. So we are
longer than we anticipated.
Yeah, an hour and 20 minutes. Holy hell. But for now, wrapping everything up, is there any notes you wanted to conclude on? Anything that's coming up for this week?
I can't think of anything at the moment.
It is incredibly late at night. Azilie is exhausted, and I am as well. There's no big life events going on, so the schedule should be on as it normally is. I will let you guys know what's going on with the Let's Play for the Assassin's Creed. Basically waits until I get contacted back from Ubisoft, because I really can't release anything until then.
Yeah. We're going to be keeping an eye out on the next Guild Wars event that's going to be coming up next month. Yes. So, look forward to that.
Yes, we'll probably do some coverage of that, unlike the October event, which we basically had to completely miss. I mean, we got to play a little bit of it, but we didn't actually get to cover it.
Yeah.
So, there is that. Alright. Everything sounds good. If there's anything in particular that you want to see from the channel, please let us know down below. Because we're always willing for input. We always kind of want to see what you guys want, and if we can meet those requests, then we can meet them. So, there you are. For now, This has been Lyiat
and Azilie
with the Cyan Firefly, and we will catch you all next time.
See ya.
Farewell, Fireflies.